Welcome to the Beautiful Game Plan podcast, produced by Focus Shift Films and sponsored by Welsh sports fans. I'm your host, Daniel J. Harris. I'm a filmmaker and entrepreneur working across sport, and I'm a huge fan of sports content. This podcast is my chance to meet amazing people who are doing amazing things in the sports content space and to share their stories with you in the hope that it inspires ideas. First series began whilst I was still working as commercial director at Eastleigh Media. Let's dive in and meet our guest. Today I have Nicole Allison of Worcester City Women. Nicole, hello and welcome. Can you tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do, please?
Hi Dan, thanks for having me on the podcast. So as you said, I'm CEO of Worcester City Women Football Club. I'm actually the owner of the club as well. So it's something that I started about 2.5 years ago. So I'm in my third season now running the club. We're a completely amateur club. We are standalone, independent. So we're not attached to any men's football club. We are 100% owned by me. And we've now grown to 3 teams, about 67 players, 20 to 25 coaches, and members of staff, 10 to 15 volunteers on match days. So we're quite a significant size organisation now, which, as you can imagine, takes up a huge part of my time. But outside of that, I also run my own consultancy, all dedicated to women's football and sport in some respects, sometimes a little bit outside of football. But I'm a talent manager, so I have a number of different clients that I support in their careers outside of on the pitch. And then I'm also a lecturer and teacher and educator, so work with a number of different universities and private education institutions all around women's football. And then also consultant, so any kind of consultancy project that's to do with growing women's sport, then I'm involved.
Fantastic. Yeah, you've got quite the CV, and former general manager at Spurs as well, kind of looking after the women's side there. You've done a number of things across football. What is it about football that you love, and kind of what drives you?
Well, a great question. I mean, football's been a part of my life from the moment that I could, remember. And if you ask my mum or dad and brother, they would say before I could even talk or walk, I was kicking a ball. So for me, football is everything. It's actually what I owe, a huge part of my life to, my social circle, my career, my skills that I feel I've learned, all comes down actually, when I think about it, to what I've learned through being involved in football. And I've played, I've coached, and then been in the business side of the game for the last sort of 13, 14 years. For me, it's family, it's community, and particularly now it's probably around, for me, it's about legacy and what legacy I can leave, what impact I can have on other people. As I said, I'm an educator, and I think football's a great way to educate people. I think it's a brilliant way of bringing people together worldwide. We all talk about football being that, language that connects everybody. We don't even need to speak the same language, but if you can connect via football, then we all speak that language. So football's a huge part of my life, as it is many, and I think I use that as a vehicle to engage and connect with others. So it's something that I think is a key part of the culture we have at Worcester City Women as well. We're on a really long journey together with people. It's not a quick term, a quick fix for something, and that's short term. This is about a long 10, 20, 30 year project to develop something that's really sustainable. And if we think about the history of women's football, we know that relatively it's actually very new. And we've still got to develop lots of structures and foundations, which is why we're focusing on that really at Worcester City Women. So it's an exciting time for us, and I think that's where, hopefully anyway, my experience and my passion for the game, particularly the women's game, really kind of comes through in our culture and foundations that we're building.
Fantastic. And we've had many conversations before about women's football and about how to present it and how to build upon its kind of qualities. And I think it was about 2.5 years ago, the last time we spoke, when you just kind of arrived at Worcester City. And now 2.5 years later, you've done so much. Can you tell us about that project? How did it come about? Do you know what I mean? How did it start, and why Worcester?
So obviously we're talking 2.5 years ago, middle of 2020, the pandemic had started. I had at that point started my own consultancy about 6 months before. So I suppose being, newly self-employed and working in the industry, that was quite tough. Being hit with a global pandemic, football stopped. So a lot of the projects and contracts that I actually had were due to start in the April 2020 and then never did start because of COVID and because of football not restarting. So it actually gave me an opportunity to really think, what is it that I really want to do? And I looked at my experiences of being player, coach, working the business side of the game, working in men's football, working in women's football, as I had done just then and left Tottenham, and thought what I really enjoyed the most and still do is growing things, developing people. Being at a club was probably the most satisfying part of my career at that point, where I really felt that we'd developed something special at Tottenham Hotspur Women, and we'd just got into that point where we were at that next stage of development of, going into the professional women's Super League, and the club has now gone from strength to strength. So for me, I kind of look back on that experience and felt, well, I want to do that with my own club. I want to take a club from the very bottom of the pyramid all the way to the top. I want to create a professional football club and all of the infrastructure to give people the opportunities that I didn't have when I grew up. And I looked at 5 other clubs. I did an audit as to which area, location in the country, what club did I actually think would have the most potential. And Worcester actually came out on top from a number of different things that I analysed. I'm from Worcester originally. That was my hometown. It was where I was born and brought up. It's where my parents still lived. So I often went back to Worcester, and obviously therefore felt a real connection and a sense of, as I mentioned, family and community. Worcester was something I was very passionate about. But actually thinking of it from a business perspective, the potential of having a women's football team, a professional women's football team in the city and in that area was huge. A really strong university that had a good sports facilities and sports educational system, but yet not really anything to enable those students that were coming out of the university to keep them within the city and work at a professional sports team. Other than the Worcester Warriors at the time, the rugby team, the professional rugby team that was there at the time. I felt like in terms of the competitors in and around the area, there weren't a huge amount of competitors. So if you could create a professional football club in Worcester, then actually you could kind of have the majority of that market. And I felt that not a huge amount had changed from when I grew up there. If you were a talented player, age 14, 15, and you wanted to play at the highest level, you had to travel to your West Broms, to your Wolves, to your Villas. And that's still the case now. If you want to play at a high level and be within the kind of England pathways and be recognised. So actually I wanted to change that. And I kind of thought about all of the players that had missed out on being identified. Some really talented players that maybe couldn't get to West Brom or couldn't get to Wolves because, that requires parents, it requires finances, it requires time that not everybody is privileged to have. So Worcester, as a city of, around 100,000 people, deserves a really competitive, high performance culture in football. So that's what we set out to create. And as I said, we're now kind of 2.5, 3 years in, and really pleased to say that we've developed a really strong pathway from an under 18s through to development team and through to the first team. First team are really now competitive, pushing for promotion into a national league. And of course, we can maybe talk a little bit about the structures of the women's football pyramid in and around those areas and how important it is for us to get more support and for us to go through that pyramid so that we can get more access to funding and what have you. But we're in a really, really strong position now as a performance setting. And everybody in the area knows that Worcester City Women are about achievement and about success and about, getting to that next stage. And I think that shows with our facilities that we play at. First team play out of Sixways Stadium, 11,000 seater stadium that was home to Worcester Warriors Rugby, is currently home to Worcester Warriors Women Rugby, which is a standalone women's rugby club doing really, really well at the top level of women's rugby. So in Worcester, we've got a quite a unique situation where we have two standalone, independently owned women's sports teams that are doing really, really well. And I think that's something that should be shouted about.
Fantastic. Yeah, it sounds like there's amazing things going on there, and it sounds like you've built those core values in from the beginning. How important for you was it that you started with a strong mission, a strong brand, strong values?
Incredibly important, and I put that down to then how we've recruited so well, both players and staff and volunteers, because everybody knows what they're part of. Everybody knows the direction we're going in. Everybody knows what our vision is, and if you're really clear with that, then if anybody doesn't want to get there or doesn't want to be on that bus, it's simple, and they get off the bus and they go elsewhere. And that's not to say that that's a negative thing for some people. It just happens that if that's not your ambition and you're not aligned with that vision and our values, that's absolutely fine. But then this isn't the club for you, and go elsewhere. So it's been crucial that we set that up right from the off, being really clear in what we expect, and there's kind of a very clear roadmap for that and where we want to be. But we also, we engaged the players and the staff in that process. So that wasn't just me coming in and saying, this is what I want, this is what I'm talking about, and it's got to be my way. It's actually been about engaging and empowering others. So we actually did a really fascinating session with our players, not this pre-season, but the pre-season before, with a sports psychologist, and we talked to them about high performance, about culture, about our vision, about what does success look like for us as a football club, and importantly to those players, what does success look like for them individually? How do they want to leave the shirt? Because ultimately we're talking about this long-term project, right? And the players that we have right now are not going to be professional footballers for us, because it's going to take time to get there. And all of our players have their own careers. They are absolutely in dual careers, as well as them playing football. But all of them are very much bought into the journey and the legacy that they can have, and how do they want to leave their shirt for the next generation. And that's been really important and crucial in our recruitment, that we don't just want football players at this club. We want great people that want to inspire the next generation. So building our own values, building our own identity, and having players, staff, volunteers all feed into that has been crucial, and it's what we live and breathe by now. And we're always coming back to those values. We're always coming back to those expectations that we've set of people, so everybody's aligned.
Yeah, there needs to be a certain level of selflessness, doesn't there, to be laying the foundations for something that you will not reap the benefits of. And so getting the right people that aren't looking for those quick wins and that kind of success and glory to come to them, but for them to lay the foundations for someone else to go on and get that glory, that takes a certain someone, doesn't it?
It does, absolutely. And as I said, you're not going to always get those people that want to be part of that, and that's absolutely fine. But as long as you're clear with what you do expect and the type of people that you do want and what that takes, then you will you'll eventually build a team of people that want to be part of that. And as I said, we've now got 3 teams with we've got an organisation that's around about 100 people, all volunteers, that are so incredibly passionate and committed and dedicated to this project. And that's why we've moved and grown pretty quickly.
Fantastic. And I get the sense that this opportunity at Worcester, everything you've been through, everything you've learned, everything you've seen, everything you've experienced, the good, the bad and the ugly, has kind of fueled kind of what you want from this. So What kind of things have you kind of seen through your career that have inspired you? What things have you seen through your career that have frustrated you? And kind of how do those things feed into now?
Yeah, you're right. It's you definitely reflect. I'm quite a reflective person, and I think about all the different opportunities that I've had, or even maybe opportunities that I haven't had. And you think, why has that been the case? And I often use that to motivate me and inspire me to think, well, I never had that opportunity, and that was a real disappointment for me. But actually, instead of kind of, I suppose, wallowing in that, how can I make change for the next person? So, and that's just something that has always driven me. How can I make things better? How can I grow things? I think some specific things that I've probably learned, certainly in the football industry, the men's football industry, some short-term quick fixes, and how clubs and organisations have been very reactive, and short-term focused very, very much on winning, and how winning kind of drives everything, and drives every decision. And of course, winning and being successful on the pitch is crucial. But if you don't have anything else driving you or anchoring you when you don't win, and winning can't happen for everybody, that's the nature of sport, then you're going to be in trouble and you're not going to be sustainable. So it's I've learned a lot about building long-term strategies and projects, and I suppose empowering people to become on that journey. Being a team player, I think, is crucial, and you kind of learn that through playing sport, and it's such an important transferable skill that you get from playing in a team sport such as football. And I've really kind of taken that on my career journey of how important that is to bring people with you, empower others, just be that good human, I think is crucial. I think in terms of some of the stuff that, from a leadership perspective, things that kind of sit with me, being a female in a very male dominated world, is that kind of glass ceiling that we talk about quite a lot. I've often been frustrated in roles where I feel like I've not been able to get to that next level. So that's something that really drives me every day, is to try and break that glass ceiling and remove that entirely from others. And that would be real success for me if I can, particularly in my local area and local community, create a professional football club that employs people, that gives up people opportunities to work in football, and identify all of those areas that you can work in football. It doesn't just mean being a player, a coach, a referee. Actually, we're talking about, working in finance, working in marketing, working in operations. All of those things can also, be applied to working in a football club. So it's about empowering and educating those people, utilizing the experiences that I've had as well, to ensure that we can make change and we can build a lasting legacy.
Riverside Sports Bar with Welsh sports fans is Newport's premier sports bar and has been voted best sports bar at the Welsh Hospitality Awards. With a range of huge TVs, an incredible food menu with burgers, dirty fries and much more, including vegan options, it is the place to watch sport. Visit www.riversidesportsbarnewport.com to find out more.
My next question for you is who in women's football is kind of getting that right? Who's engaging with their fans and with sponsors in the right way and kind of driving the women's game forward?
I think there's a lot of really good examples. I'd pick out Lewes as a great club to do things differently. Obviously, we know Lewes as being that narrative of Equality FC. That's a kind of a narrative that a lot of people will know about. But in terms of how they do things and engage with the whole community, and when they say community, that can be local as well as international. I think looking at how they've grown the club and grown their ownership base internationally is huge. And I know as a fellow CEO, sort of looking up to Maggie Murphy, CEO at Lewis. Yeah, she's very, very clear on her own values, and I think that really comes through with the nature of the club. And I really like what they do from a match day experience and how they engage the fans. And as I said, I think they've really hit the chord nicely in terms of it being quite localized, but also actually appealing to people internationally as well. So I think there's certainly one, to look at and think, how are they doing things differently? On a bigger scale, I often look at Arsenal, which, can be quite difficult being a Tottenham fan. But in terms of what Arsenal women have always done, being a huge club and a most successful club throughout the 90s, and how they've actually developed their own identity and brand whilst also being clearly associated to, a huge global brand. I think they constantly innovate. They constantly think of content and the way that they, they've sold out the Emirates a couple of times now for their games, be that in the WSL or in kind of Champions League. And they've got the attendance records that we see across the Super League. And it's really impressive how they do that time and time again. But I think in terms of some of their content and working with specific partners, they're a club that have specific partners and sponsors just for their women's team, which I think is really, really good. And how they've actually activated some of that, utilising their players, is really, really important. And I think we're starting to see other clubs, do the same. I know Chelsea have actually appointed in the last couple of months a commercial director specifically for the women's team. And she has a huge amount of experience in the sporting industry as well. So I think we're starting to really see that unique identity come through of the women's team, even if you're a women's team that's associated to a men's team, if you like, your kind of Premier League brands, which is really important. So there's some really good successful examples. And I mean, I think if we think internationally, in Kansas City, KC Current, they're building currently the first ever women's football stadium, so specific to a women's football club. So we're used to obviously thinking, right, okay, women's football being played at the Emirates, for example, that's the home of the men's team, whereas KC Current are building their own stadium. I think it's 12,000. They've sold pretty much all of their season tickets, ready for the start of their next season. And I think that's really special. That's really unique in that this is something that they've invested in to build that stadium, and it's women specific. And how that then supports the engagement of female fans and grows female fan bases, I think is crucial. So yeah, take a lot of inspiration from KC Current as well.
That's really interesting. Like, I've looked at some of the stuff that Man City do, and I kind of really like the fact that Man City give their men's and women's team a kind of equal footing, and they both get the same kind of shop window time. But actually, if Arsenal are giving their women their own specific kind of brand and visibility, and Chelsea are giving their women their own specific brand and visibility, I think there's kind of pros and cons with both a little bit, isn't there? Do you mean kind of Man City going, right, we're all equal, and Arsenal going, well, actually, let's give the women specifically what they need, and Chelsea saying the same sort of thing. It's a difficult one to decide which has the most value. They both provide value in different ways. Where do you stand on that? Should it be the women standing alone, or is it great to be associated with the men and have that same visibility?
I think there isn't a one size fits all, and it often is a bespoke situation, and how it often comes down to the leadership of the club, and I think obviously there are huge advantages to being associated with particularly, a Premier League club, not least the financial contribution that they can make and the facilities that you naturally then have access to. But then if the leadership of that club isn't there to put the women's and girls at the real forefront of the strategy, and also understand that women and girls football isn't just a copy and paste job from the boys and the men's, then it's not going to work. So I think you have to have the understanding and the recognition that women's football, the industry itself, is at a different stage. It attracts a different fan base, and we should be celebrating that. We should be growing that and developing it. I think that's crucial, and you can, if you recognize that, then you can have the benefit and you can work together in kind of almost a perfect harmony to ensure that you have the advantages and you don't necessarily have the disadvantages. I think, for a club like us at Worcester, there's no real benefit to us actually being attached to, a men's team that doesn't have a huge name. They don't have the facilities. So why would we be connected to something that doesn't understand women's football or the industry or our fan base? And actually, we can be a lot more nimble and specific to what we're trying to grow if we're standalone, which is, the way that we've gone. And that doesn't mean that we don't have a good relationship with Worcester City men's team. It actually means that we both do what we're good at for the areas that we're good at and we've got expertise in. So I think it can work both ways, and it often depends on so many different variables: location, history, fan base, the financial terms, the facilities. You have to weigh everything up ultimately. But from my own experience, leadership is everything, and having a champion for the women and girls is crucial, and understanding that it isn't just the same. It's not just something you can copy and paste and expect to work. It is different, and it needs its own vision, it needs its own values, it needs its own strategy.
Yeah, that's it. It's something we spoke about many times. It's something that Maggie Murphy said to me: pink it and shrink it is not the solution. The men have got that. Make it smaller, put a bit of pink on it, and that'll work for women. It doesn't work that way. And we've had conversations, and I've had conversations with Maggie Murphy about this, and things like football boots. Well, just make it smaller, put pink on it, and that's what the girls and the women will be happy with. Women carry their weight differently, so they need their studs on different parts of their feet. The arch needs to be built in a slightly different way to support them. You've got to look at what that club and what the women specifically need and make it work. It can't just be an afterthought, can it? Do you know what I mean? Pink it and shrink it, and we'll give them something and they'll go away. That attitude does not work on any level, and it just wastes everyone's time and money. So yeah, seeing a club that whether it's standalone or whether it's partnered with their men's side, but that vision and that thought is there of, right, how do we make this the best it can be? So it's great, and it does what it needs to do for everyone involved.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think gone are the days when it kind of was just assumed we can pink it and shrink it, and no one will say anything. Or I think there was maybe a culture in women's football where we would just have to feel grateful for receiving something, whether that be kit or anything at all. Whereas actually, I think people are starting to kind of say, well, we're not just grateful, we deserve this, or actually we add a huge amount of value. We're a huge asset to any football club, and I think we are starting to see leadership change from seeing women's football or the women's football section as a drain on resource, and actually seeing it as a long-term investment and seeing that reward coming through. But this is where we have to recognize that it is long-term, and it's not you can't see instant rewards from something. We know we know that the history of women's football is actually a real long one, in terms of it was really successful over 100 years ago, attracting tens of thousands of people to games. And then the FA ban has completely, changed the course of the history of the game and the development of the game. And we're still trying to get out of that. And, I think that's important to recognise quite how fast the game's moved forward in the last sort of 10 years, that we've seen more investment, particularly from the governing body, the Football Association. But we're still having to catch up in terms of mentalities quite a lot. And in terms of, research, when you mentioned football boots and stuff there, and there's obviously a great organisation in IDA, the boots that I know are, probably work with Lewis quite closely, that have done so much research on female athletes, and actually the boot, that's the shape of the boot, the studs that's needed to support the female body. And it kind of seems crazy to us, doesn't it, that things, even our coaching manuals, our delivery, the fitness testing, everything has been done on men, and we just copy and paste that, thinking, oh, we'll just do that in the women's game. And we're starting to change that, but of course it takes time. Research takes time, and we're very much at the very beginning, I think, of that. And then when you look at the business side of the game as well, it's different. We need to have a different lens on looking at the women's game and how we develop it, and looking at fan bases, why that's different. How do we communicate with people that are wanting to watch women's football? And, that doesn't mean that we're only trying to attract people that are fans of women's football and not fans of men's football, but there are so many different segments and segmentations that we need to think about and be quite personalized to. So there's a lot of learning that we're doing in the women's game, and those clubs that are getting it right are certainly, I think, the ones that recognize it does need its own space to grow. It can't be something that's just a bolt-on and expect us to tick a few boxes and then expect it to develop and make loads of money for them. It requires time, it requires investment, it requires expertise.
Absolutely. And like we know, we follow the women's game in Wales. We've done lots of stuff for the Wales women's team. It's not that long ago that they were given the hand-me-down kits to the men's team, and you've got women wearing shirts that are 2-3 sizes too big for them. Do you know what I mean? And it's kind of an afterthought. So when it was very recently, the FAW designed the Wales women's shirt, and there was a shirt specifically for the women's team, you could see that kind of sense in pride, because they did deserve it, and they were amazing women doing amazing things. And then you start to see some of the men wearing the women's shirt, and you start to think that's fantastic to see people supporting them, having their own shirt, having their own space, having their own identity, and supporting that. And that's the way it should be.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And you see, clubs do have a lot of great collaboration now with the, male players supporting the female players and vice versa, but be that at games or, through content creation and all of that. And that's obviously clearly one of the big ways that we can help grow fan bases for the women's game, and kind of use that support that people see from the men's game to do that. But yeah, I mean, that example you've just given of the FAW, recognizing again how important it is to make and build an identity for the women's team and those structures, and not least just the National League, but then actually thinking about the domestic and grassroots pyramid within Welsh women's football as well is crucial. I'm sure that that's part of the process.
Exactly. I've got one final question for you. So what advice do you have for football clubs or any other sports organisation who are looking to inform and engage their female fan base?
I think it's about recognising what we've really just been talking about, in that you can't just think that something worked for the men's game and replicate it and it will instantly work for the women's game. So how do we then inform ourselves about what female fan bases want? Research is crucial. I've worked in research quite a bit over the course of my career in sport and in football fan research, and the power of actually asking people what they think, what they want, is
don't assume.
Simple concept, but not enough people do it, not enough clubs do it. So yeah, thinking about how do we actually engage and ask the fan base, what do you want? How do you feel on a match day when maybe these people haven't ever been to a football match before, and actually the process of going and buying a ticket online, and the idea of going to a stadium and getting your ticket and going through a turnstile and thinking, hang on, I'm row 81, seat 236, like what does that even mean? And I think us actually recognizing that we need to communicate in certain ways to the different fan bases, and think about who do we want to attract to women's football. It's naturally a more family friendly, accessible sport, and not just because of the kind of the amount it costs, the financial side of it is much cheaper than the men's game. But then it's about how do we engage with those fans on a match day, and how do we continue to then engage with them post the match day, so that they become part of our long-term plan. So I think, advice would be actually speak and engage to the fan base, find out what they want, find out and think about it. Think about your competitors. What are you as a football club competing against? Because it's not just football or other sport. Think about leisure activities that people have the option to do on a Sunday afternoon. Why would they as a family on a Sunday afternoon choose to come and watch and come to your football club as opposed to go to the cinema or a restaurant or a shopping mall or a zoo, a safari park? Think of all those family type activities and think about what you're offering as a football club, because nowadays it's far more than the 90-minute match. It's about everything else that you offer in and around that. And even at a club at our level where we're playing at tier 5, we've got an FA Cup game in a couple of weeks, and we've got face painters, we've got bouncy castle, we've got kids zone where they're doing colouring in, and it's all in and around football, but it's giving them an experience that's not just about coming and sitting down for 90 minutes and watching a game. It's actually how can we engage the whole family and make it a really great day out for them. So think about that competition that you're up against, and speak to them and engage with them.
And it is a much kind of more family friendly environment, and it's a great entry level opportunity for children to go and experience football. Like if you go and watch Wales men and you're in the Canton stand in Cardiff and you're seeing all those blokes in the bucket hats and they've kind of had 5, 6, 7 beers on the way down, and then you go to a women's match and see those same blokes, they haven't had the same amount of beers and they've got their children with them. Do you know what I mean? So their experience is on the Camden stand with the kind of hardcore for the men's, but they're using the women's game to get their kids involved, come along, experience it, watch the football, get involved and enjoy that family-friendly atmosphere, and that brings them into the game. So yeah, I love seeing stuff like that, seeing how different people react with the different games and the ways they engage with it. So Nicole, absolutely brilliant. I always love talking to you. I always find it fascinating, and we always have a good chat. So thank you very much for your thoughts and ideas. I'm sure there's plenty of stuff there that anyone watching or listening can kind of learn from. And thank you to those watching or listening at home for taking the time to indulge myself and Nicole. I hope it was useful. Don't forget to like and share this episode and subscribe to the channel for more content.